All right, it's winter go home season. Week 14 waiver wire pickups are on this episode. If you're looking for a specific position, check the timestamps below. I usually in this video series include both stream plays for the specific week and long-term plays. This week I'm going to break those out. The long-term plays for teams that didn't make the playoffs and are in a keeper in a dynasty league, I'm going to take care of that on another video. This video is all about winning, and I'm going to give you 5 or maybe a little bit more waiver pickups for each position. Before we get started, as I always say, please, for 2 seconds, your time, 2 clicks, a like and a subscribe. Please help us continue to grow so that we can make these videos cooler. But let's dig in with the quarterbacks in order. My favorite plays based on the matchup this week. I like Ryan Tannehill versus Oakland. Now, look, I know Oakland is getting better and better in the secondary, but I like what Ryan Tannehill is doing. He's aided by a very, very good running game, obviously, with Derrick Henry. Ryan Tannehill, since he's taken over, has scored well in every game. Even the game where he threw 2 interceptions against Carolina, he still scored well in that game. I think he'll continue to get it going. I like his complement of wide receivers as well. He's got Jonnu Smith now at tight end, Corey Davis, A.J. Brown, Adam Humphries, and of course, you have Dion Lewis and the very formidable Derrick Henry out of the backfield. Only owned in 21.4% of the leagues. More often than not, he will be available if you need a quarterback for some reason this week. Next on the list is Kirk Cousins. I do think he'll bounce back from the Monday Night Football loss. Playing Detroit. Detroit's giving up some points. I love the matchup for Kirk Cousins, owned in 58.2% of the leagues. I said before the Monday Night Football game that I wouldn't care. Whatever his stats were against Seattle, I wouldn't care. I still like him going forward. I think he'll respond. Sam Darnold, now he's questionable, so keep an eye out. But Miami, I think, gives him a nice matchup. Only owned in 27.7% of leagues. Sam Darnold should have himself a nice game. I think Ryan Griffin, Robbie Anderson, Demaryius Thomas, Jamison Crowder, this offense is continuing to coalesce. Remember, Sam Darnold missed a lot of games early in the year when people thought that the New York Jets were basically a trash team back when their third-string quarterback Luke Falk was making starts. This is a different team. The New York Jets have been scoring as of late. Yes, I know they got bounced last week against Cincinnati. But, Sam Darnold, I think, will bounce back. So there you go. Daniel Jones against Green Bay. The New York Giants have been scoring pretty well in spite of some receiver running back injuries with Saquon Barkley earlier in the year. Evan Ingram has been out. Daniel Jones, yes, he's going to throw some interceptions, but he'll also give you some touchdown passes. I like him, 34.6% owned, so he's going to be out there. And I've been talking Baker Mayfield up quite a bit as of late, playing the Cincinnati Bengals. The middle of the defense should be open for him. Guys like Jarvis Landry should have a nice day. Odell Beckham is always looming on the outside. They're integrating Kareem Hunt more and more. David Njoku could be back from the injured reserve as well. I like Baker Mayfield to get you a couple touchdown passes if needed this week. He's only owned in 61.9% of the leagues. Let's move it on to defense and special teams. Now, this is where it kind of gets a little bit weird. For me, I actually like Tennessee versus Oakland a little bit more than I like Minnesota, but I've looked around, I've done the research. I want to give you, everybody out there, the best list that I can possibly give you. Minnesota against Detroit seems to be the consensus, best kind of out there on waivers kind of defense, only owned in 65.3% of the leagues. Detroit is down to their third-string quarterback. I think their third-string running back. Yes, they have Golladay. Yes, they have Jones. What scares me a little bit about Detroit is this new quarterback. He throws deep. He's kind of like what Gardner Minshew was the first couple of weeks for Jacksonville. He's going to test the Minnesota secondary, and we've seen and we saw on Monday Night Football that they can lose some guys in coverage deep. So. I do like Minnesota's defense. I like the matchup, but I'm a little bit more concerned. Tennessee is continuing to come on with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback. As I've been saying the last couple of weeks, Tennessee's defense has more time to rest because Tannehill is converting more third downs than Mariota was. I like the matchup. Now, I do think Oakland will get back on track and score, but I like Tennessee basically to create some turnovers and some sacks, only owned in 31.7% of the leagues. And again, they'd probably be my favorite waiver wire pickup. I picked them up last week, and they were the #1 defense in the league, so there you go. The New York Jets against Miami. Now they lost their good safety. I believe it's Adams. Sometimes I get him and the Charger safety confused based on I think they came out in the same draft. But the New York Jets, just make sure Adams plays. I like the matchup. I don't think that Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to put up 37 points again or whatever he put up against the Eagles. 34.7% of the league owned. Greg Williams blitzes. Blitzes create sacks and turnovers. That's what you need in defense to have a good week. The Philadelphia Eagles, yes, I do think they'll bounce back against the New York Giants. Now, I mentioned earlier that I like Daniel Jones at quarterback. Although I like him at quarterback, I don't think that he's going to dominate, nor do I think Philadelphia's defense will dominate. But you will get, as I said with Daniel Jones, interceptions, and you'll get sacks. So I like Philadelphia to bounce back this week defensively. And then Tampa Bay, only owned in 2.8% of leagues. The Indianapolis Colts continue to be banged up. Now, this should come with an asterisk. I should have put an asterisk on there. If T.Y. Hilton plays, if Marlon Mack plays, this is a different Indianapolis Colts team. If they play, I like Tampa Bay's defense considerably less. If they don't play, then I like Tampa Bay's defense. Let's move it to tight ends. So, look, when Eric Ebron went on waivers, and we mentioned just now about the Indianapolis Colts, being banged up in some of the key positions, when all that stuff happened, Jack Doyle basically turned himself into a 5-target a game to a 10 to 15 target a game tight end. He had a huge number in terms of targets last week. That will translate to receptions, receiving yards, and of course touchdowns. I like him against Tampa Bay regardless of who else is playing, whether it's Mack or Paris Campbell coming back, T.Y. Hilton coming back. 45.9% owned and rostered in different leagues. Look, he needs to be a rostered tight end. He's going to be a monster for the rest of the season. He should be picked up not only this week for the play, but going forward as well. He's one of my favorite basically ads, and you could make the argument to flex him out if you can flex multiple tight ends in your league. So you can make that argument week to week. Now, Tyler Higbee, honestly, he should have an asterisk as well. I missed that against Seattle. Gerald Everett, we don't know what's going to happen there. He's questionable. Obviously, he didn't play last week. Higbee had a huge game. Do I think Higbee will consistently reproduce those games going forward? No, but if Gerald Everett is out, I do think he is worth playing this week. Only owned in 0.6% of leagues. Just don't think that he's going to reproduce that going forward. But again, if Everett is out and you need a win this week and you need a tight end, he's a good play. Caden Smith is asterisked there. Basically, the New York Giants, he's the third tight end on the list, but he's scoring well for the Giants. And I do think he'll score well. Actually, I think the Giants are playing Green Bay. That might be it. No, they are. On Monday Night Football, they're playing Philadelphia. They played Green Bay last week. Caden Smith had a nice game. Now, obviously, if Evan Ingram is back, you start Evan Ingram and you remove Caden Smith from your waiver wire list. If Rhett Ellison is playing, same thing. You play Rhett Ellison instead of Caden Smith. But if those guys are out again, I think Caden Smith will have a nice game for you. Jonnu Smith, who I like, Delaney Walker is on the injured reserve. I mentioned how much I like Ryan Tannehill. I think Jonnu Smith could get in the end zone this week. And you can see the first 4 guys on my list are owned in well, I guess not Jack Doyle, but Higbee, Smith, Jonnu Smith, owned in less than 10% of leagues. In some cases, owned in less than 1% of leagues. So there is value and talent out there. Dallas Goedert, I think, has a nice game against the Giants, owned in 37.4% of the league. Yes, I know they have Zach Ertz, but again, Philadelphia has to use 2 tight ends because they don't have an over-the-top threat. So it's more about ball control and moving the chains, and Dallas Goedert is very good in that regard, and he's good on the in the red zone. Now, Kyle Rudolph also has an asterisk. I like him a lot more if Thielen is out, and especially if Dalvin Cook is out. Now, if those guys are back in, honestly, I remove Rudolph from this list. Rudolph turns more into a blocker when Adam Thielen and Dalvin Cook are playing. When they're out, he turns into more of a kind of an outlet for moving the chains and, of course, the red zone. So just pay attention to the other injuries for the Minnesota Vikings. Moving the list on here, we have the wide receivers in Week 14. Devontae Parker is actually projected well. I'm not overreacting to his 2 touchdowns against the Eagles. His analytics are just good against the New York Jets this week, owned in 64.7%. Expect that to spike after his performance against the Jets. Next on the list, I have Auden Tate / John Ross, but you notice I actually have John Ross on his own line below. That really should just be Auden Tate against the Cleveland Browns, owned in 16.8% of leagues. Now, John Ross right below that, Cleveland, owned in 7.3% of leagues. John Ross, as of the time of this recording, is still on the injured reserve. He has practiced the last 2 or 3 weeks. He could be activated with Andy Dalton throwing the ball. We saw what happened earlier in the season. I tend to think that A.J. Green will not play because, the Bengals are a 1-win team at this point. Why risk A.J. Green's health for next season to play him now if he's still questionable? I say just put A.J. Green on the injured reserve. If John Ross comes back, I think he could have a huge game. People are forgetting about him because he's still on the injured reserve. He's a guy not only this week I like if he's activated, but for the rest of the season while Andy Dalton is playing, I think he's fantastic, owned in 7.3% of your leagues. If you are in a deeper league, just pick him up and stash him. You will be thankful you did. Zach Pascal and Paris Campbell, the next two on the list there, both playing Tampa Bay. Now, I tend to like Paris Campbell's talent a little bit more, but Zach Pascal, I think, is more integrated into this offense. If T.Y. Hilton plays, I like both of these guys a little bit less, so just take that as it is. Take it with a grain of salt. Next guy on the list, Russell Gage. Again, Julio Jones. At this point, Atlanta, I think they're a 3-win team. Why rush Julio Jones back? There's no upside to doing that. I tend to think Julio Jones will sit out this week. You can't rush a guy like Julio Jones back when you don't have playoff position. And honestly, at this point, Atlanta, they're bad enough to where they're actually fighting for an earlier draft pick. It's actually good for the roster for the Atlanta Falcons to bench Julio Jones, which means I think Russell Gage has a big game just like he has the last 2 weeks. Playing Carolina, he will have his opportunities deep. He will have his opportunities underneath as well. Only owned in 4.3% of your leagues. Daily Fantasy Sports, I love him. And then in your fantasy football lineup this week, I like him. And then Sterling Shepard against the Philadelphia Eagles, I also like him. 65.6% owned, playing the Philadelphia Eagles, who give up some yardage in the passing game. I like him moving forward as well. Let's finish this up with running backs. I have a few on the list, a few asterisks as well. Darius Geis, only owned in 51.7% of leagues. I said at a video beginning of the week, he was owned in like 52 or 53% last week, and people dropped him. And then what does he do? He goes for 12.9 yards per carry and a couple of touchdowns. Geis is not only good this week, he's good moving forward. He's a back that gets volume even when the Redskins are losing. They integrate him into the passing game. Playing Green Bay, yes, I think Green Bay's defense will play Washington tough, but I just think that Darius Geis will score points regardless. In all honesty, I have Darius Geis below Chase Edmonds. If Chase Edmonds plays, I'll get to him in a bit. But, just again, moving forward, I just like him because I like his projection this week, and I love him moving forward in the playoff season. So that's why I would bump him up in my waiver wire. Again, only about half the leagues out there. Chase Edmonds has an asterisk. I've mentioned David Johnson. I think has fallen out of favor with Coach Cliff Kingsbury. I think David Johnson will be out. I like Chase Edmonds if he can play. He has that hamstring issue. If he can't, I like Kenyon Drake more, but he's going to be owned in a lot of leagues. Chase Edmonds is a good guy to stash, 11.8% owned in leagues. They're not going to rush him back, but if he is available, he will play. I believe he will be the starter and get the bulk of the touches at the running back position, even over Kenyon Drake. 11.8% owned. So he'll be out there for you. Now, Jordan Wilkins has an asterisk. We know Jonathan Williams was kind of benched and Wilkins took over in the second half. I have a little bit of risk here. I think the Colts are going to ride the hot hand, whether it's Wilkins or Williams. But Marlon Mack could be back this week. The Colts are still in the thick of things in the playoff race, so they will rush Mack back if they need him. And if Mack can play, he will play. So, again, if Mack is active, just take Wilkins off, and he comes with some risk because of Jonathan Williams anyway. Duke Johnson against Denver. Teams like to attack Denver with running backs in the flats. That's Duke Johnson's game. I think he'll have a nice game, 60% owned. Royce Freeman, only owned in 63% of the leagues in his own right, playing against Houston. I think he'll get some in between the tackles kind of carries there. I think he'll be very good. I like Jamal Williams because he gets volume regardless of the game. If Green Bay's down, I actually think he's more involved in the passing game anyway. He gets goal line carries. It's kind of a weird composite for a third down running back, but he gets the tough carries in the short yardage situations, and he gets receiving yards on third down. It's a weird combination, but it's a formidable one in fantasy. If you're desperate at running back, he's a good one to have, and he'll get you consistent touches, especially in PPR leagues. Lastly, Benny Snell, Arizona. The only reason I have him last is because I think James Conner will be back this week. If James Conner is out, Benny Snell is a slam dunk. 16.8% owned. If, once again, James Conner is out, I mean, you can move him to the top of the list, I think. Maybe a little bit below Darius Geis and Chase Edmonds, but certainly in the top tier there. So there is value at the running back position. Once again, if you're in a keeper or a dynasty league, you're looking for long-term plays, I'm going to put that on another video on another day, so keep an eye out for that. As always, once again, please like and subscribe. It's playoff season. We have you covered. Check out the full Week 14 playlist, which will be updated daily. The game previews and the analytics are going to start coming out. The game plans are going to be coming out later this week as well. I'm back in the home studio, and we're going to make this thing happen. We're going to get you all primed for your playoff run and your last couple of weeks here at Daily Fantasy. Check us out. Keep watching. Comment, like, subscribe, and we'll catch you on another episode soon. Thanks, everyone.